All right, shalom, everybody. Welcome to the Or Zarua Beit Midrash. This is my chance to report out about my mission to Israel. This is my chance to share with you how I carried you with me to the Holy Land. I was really ready to go October 8th. And we had Shuli come in right away after Eyal got called to base, my son-in-law. So Shuli, my daughter, came from Haifa, and that was our immediate first move. And then instead of going in November, I decided to see if Eyal's commander would give him a break and send him our way for Thanksgiving with Shuli. It's been since October 7th a conscious kind of engagement with Israel on the mind all the time, Israel on the heart, Israel in the soul, Israel and the situation. And anti-Semitism was rising in America. And here we were fighting the fight. I'm on the board of the Hillel at American University, and we had some incidents that were criminal. And so we were moving the administration to act in further ways and take a stand with the campus police and excise from the freshman curriculum. We were working in the background to already next year get rid of the colonialism that's taught about Israel, the oppressor. All this was really crystallizing as the world was thinking about what was happening at Harvard and MIT and Stanford and all these places. And with our government, who was standing stronger at first, I would say, strong in the big, and the generals and the Defense Department, of course, is still really parked on the shores of Israel, and troops are there, and we are sharing strategy, and that's what we have to keep and continuing to keep in our mind's eyes, I believe, when it comes to this relationship, and not the headlines every day, that the United States is standing by it, Israel, in the sense of the troops are parked in the right seas, and the number of strategic kind of decisions that we have to make together in this moment are conscious discussions. And we don't want another October 7th, and nor does any American really want more hostages in the right departments, at least at least the way that I hear it, and at least the way that I see it. And so that is going to be the hope that I make at the beginning of this presentation, that our own troops continue along their journey to bring us to a time of peace and safety, and return that kind of trust we have as citizens of Israel and citizens of the United States as Jews, that we can live freely and safely within borders that are our own and are what we call home, our nation, and that we do that in a kind of collective and communal way, each in our own way. But of course, I went with JNF, the Jewish National Fund, to bring the spirit of our community to the mission that they launched, and they've launched several missions for 4 and 5 days at a time, to bring volunteers, to bring Zionists to Israel. And due to the structure and infrastructure that they've built, like a UJA has built, and like other Israel advocacy organizations that have some friends in Israel, JNF has, for many, many, many decades now, over the years, created the infrastructure to further the pursuit of a Zionism that creates a space and place for the Jewish people to bring our light to the nations, a shared society, a vision of a shared society. And they invest in that very significantly, and they take care of our troops in their own way, and they are instrumental in really protecting the land itself, the land of Israel, and even are making a little bit of tshuva for the original kind of trees they planted, if that's your association with JNF, and reforesting with kind of a consultancy with environmental specialists who now know which kind of trees are right, or which wetlands that we need to reclaim. Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel can tell us more about that. But I say that by way of introduction tonight, to give you a sense that I was personally invested because of family, of course, our daughter, and our personal connections to the land of Israel, but also communally wondering, when was Or Zarua going to be able to get there, if not many of us on the ground at once, together, at least myself, bringing our kahila and our congregation's light to the land of Israel, our tzedakah, the rest of it that we didn't already give out, and our spirit in terms of what leadership I could offer to a mission of what would be 170 people with the JNF. So I want to dedicate tonight's reportage to the memory of Rena Seltzer. Alei Shalom. Artie's with us. We wish you deepest comfort. It is a Shiva period for you, Artie. We do wish you deepest comfort, and to know that Rena really was in our community and in the communities you guys are a part of, in the wider community, a real advocate for Israel, a real champion of Am Yisrael, Be'eretz Yisrael, and the light that we can shine from here to Israel, and that Israel should shine into the world. She really was committed to all of that. I'm going to share my screen now and get us into my slide program. Can everybody see it? I see Jay Palmer. I see your face. Can you see my screen now, which is a slide of Or Zarua logo and JNF? You're nodding your
Yes.
head.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
No, I had to find the unmute button. I
Yes.
Good. Now, for those of you who want to keep your mosaic of 5 people on the side, I remind you that you can keep your mosaic, but if you go to the little squares and 2 bars and 1 little rectangle and 1 smaller rectangle, you can kind of just pick the farthest left and have nobody's picture, and you can pick 1 and have only 1 person, so the screen's more visible to you. You can pin me and then just pick the second little rectangle. And if you pin me, then you can just have me in the screen. Helene, is there a way for me to pin myself? How do I do that?
Go.
Back to here. Pin.
Oh, you know what? All right, it's fine. I would, instead of pin, go spotlight for everyone.
Spotlight for everyone.
That's just removing your pin. That's fine.
The host is spotlight. Okay. So now I should be in your screen, and you should see my first slide. The Jewish National Fund decided, and really it was the brainchild of a few of the administrators there, that there should be 4-day missions going to Israel for Amcha, not just leadership groups. The first missions to go from New York were a bunch of communal leaders, governmental leaders, some rabbinical leaders who didn't have children coming this way from Israel. There were groups like that originally went. And what happened was I was looking for an opportunity to go on a mission. We had given already $10,000 to the JNF. And I knew that they had an infrastructure. And as soon as they announced these 4-day missions, I said, let's pick one, let's advertise it, let's see if anybody can go together. A friend of mine from Detroit named David, whose picture you'll see in my slides, he decided to meet me there and come. So I had a chavruta. And I was with, like I said, 170 people on this mission. I was going to meet up with them a week into my stay. Since I was going to meet everybody on a Sunday, I decided to travel a few days earlier, check in with the family, see a couple of people from organizations whom we know, who have visited our synagogue as well. And this was a shifting schedule, a shifting itinerary as the reality on the ground unfolded. Who knew what was going to be day to day still, even though it seemed to be pretty much known and in a groove? Which field would be safe to work in? We were going to do some agricultural work. Which army base we could visit to make a barbecue, or which tent. I'll show you some pictures later on of how we met soldiers and what kind of responses throughout the land of Israel individual kind of people were making, and those special people who I mentioned in my announcement for tonight. We got some of those kinds of insights through visits. The first thing JNF did was they sent me a woman's picture who was murdered by Hamas terrorists in her home in Kisufim. I thought that was profound because I could go and I knew I could make a planting in her memory. They asked us each to prepare on the day that there would be plantings for people. And one way to show our respect is to learn the stories of people who were killed that harrowing day. And she was a beloved teacher and mother and grandmother and a very special soul. A lot of her students reported that she's the reason why they stayed in school. And so her memory for a blessing, Menucha. I traveled already with one person who I didn't know before, whose legacy now is in my hands and hearts, and we should all rededicate ourselves to being the mother, the friend, the grandmother, the teacher, the educator we could be. When I got onto the plane with Ziv and Shai, you see on the right here, my sons, one of them got money from Chabad on his campus to go give his sister a hug. Amazing. They were saying, if you have family there, we want to get you a ticket. Just like JNF has what's called Project Hug, which is every lone soldier's family gets money to go fly to Israel and to be located close enough to a base where if they can get their kid 2 hours of a break, they can give their soldier a hug and be on. Amazing project. To the left is Yuval, and he's my new friend that I met on the plane trip to Israel. I say to him, Nisiat Tova, you should have a good trip, safe trip. And he says, I don't know how good it can be. I say, what do you mean? He said, my brother's a hostage. Wow. My brother owns a barbershop in Tel Aviv. He picks one music festival to stay in the music kind of scene. He produces one festival a year, and he was the producer for the second stage at the Nova Music Festival. And he's a hostage. And we prayed, as I wrote to you in my letter. I said, you want to pray? He said, I'm not so religious. I said, that's okay. I'll lead us through. And I pray with him. And then I say, you know the words of Hatikva, right? Let's pray using the words of Hatikva. And we grabbed hands and we said, Od lo avda tikvatenu. We will not lose our hope. And so we used the words of Hatikva on the plane. There I was. Later on, Eyal's brother, Maor, would ask me, did you feel the war every day? Did you feel the situation every day when you were coming here? JNF sent me someone who was murdered. I got on the plane and here's a brother of a hostage. That's how it all started. And we prayed and we cried a little. Anybody who knows on the plane that you can press, how long to destination? So I just want to point out, this is the map that comes on. You can get the satellite map. It's the little screen on the back of the seat. And so on the right is Aza. You see Aza there? Where my finger is? Right here. That's the Gaza Strip. It's a little bit grayed out because of the operations. So Aza is Gaza. Ayin Zion Hey, as in the Bible as well. And on the left with the airplane, anybody who looks at that map who's been to Israel often enough immediately sees something very different. You're not taking the southern approach. You're not going over Gazan airspace or near Ashkelon, down south. You're coming from the north. That tells you it's a different time in Israel. So here we are at the airport, and it's a different time in Israel. There's not a whole lot of people going into the welcome down the ramp. You see what's on the ramp itself, all of the bring them home posters. And then I get to the cafe because I haven't had my coffee yet. And I was thinking I'd just wrap my tefillin later. And a bunch of soldiers are there. And they start saying, well, Zman Lihipalel. Whoever is in the area to drink coffee, who wants to pray and wrap tefillin, come on over. So I take my tefillin out of the bag. And I go with these soldiers who are getting their day started at the airport. It's got to be 6:42 in the morning. and we do a little praying together. Praying is not the only way to get the day started. Haredim from Brooklyn or Hasidim fell off the plane. There's actually a piano. Anybody can play it just before you get on the train to Jerusalem. And so they wind up at the piano singing all kinds of great songs. And they escort people with all kinds of wonderful music. I don't have a video of them. They didn't want a video. So I respected their wishes. The first spot I went to was Haifa to visit Eyal and Shuli before the actual JNF mission, like I said, a couple of days. But I want to show you already the texts on the walls. One of them is a picture from my phone, but it's also a poster that was around Haifa. You know, people are still going out. The far left. Jam blues. There's a blues jam. People, if they weren't in the epicenter of disaster and they weren't turned from their homes, north and south, it's on everybody's minds. Wherever you are, whichever conversation I was having with whichever part of the family, with whichever group of people I was there with, it would now and then come up like, so you think we're going to go into Rafah today? What do you think about what, we heard from Biden? What do you think about what Trump said? What do you think about, because we were American, and as soon as they find out, they're asking us like as if we know exactly what's on the minds of every senator and congresswoman. And oh, Matem Choshvim, there's more achdut here. There's more unity than ever. Even though we know that October 6th, the whole world was divided there, the general text on the wall in every city we went to, and I went to a lot of different towns and a lot of different cities, is this middle text, B'yachad ninatzeach. That is, together, we will be victorious. And you see, like, on the train station, this kind of standard phrase, B'yachad ninatzeach, is written onto the awning, and the signs were made and produced, and it's just everywhere. Which does not exactly reflect the deepest sentiment in Israeli society, because it's seeming like there are two very different versions of government, bubbling up, just to be very frank, right? Because the Ben Gvir Smotrich version of Israel is a very different version than the centrist right and left getting together behind Benny Gantz. And 13%, only 13% would want Netanyahu to continue to be the prime minister. It's very obvious. And Israelis are asking all of us Americans, or at least me, while I was in Haifa, what do you think your administration thinks about Gantz? Because he's going to be next. He's going to be next. So according to everybody, I know exactly what they're thinking. So, but meanwhile, I tried to get a bird's eye view on things. Here we did it in the new cable cars they have in Haifa that opened up, and there's just really something special. And everybody needs a little breather and a smile, and even the kids who are displaced. Later on, I'll share about the hotel we stayed at, the luxury hotel, which was basically a dorm for people turned from their homes, both from the north and the south. We were in the 5-star Tel Aviv hotels, and half of the hotel, you see kids running through and leaving their shoes at the door and running to get a breakfast thing and stick a roll in their bag so they can get to school. Amazing. I made sure with a couple of our tzedakah dollars to give along the beach, a couple of literally $100 to a couple of the spots that sell ice cream, and said, any soldier who comes, I want you for the next however long this lasts to just hand out ice cream. Say thank you for your service. I couldn't say thank you enough to each of the individual soldiers, but that's the way to do it. And these little businesses have no tourism. So I spent a lot of tzedakah on little businesses that would otherwise totally fail and have to be basically closed. The shutters would close. Any little bit of that can help. And it's why one of my themes tonight, starting now, will be, wherever you're planning to go, it's safe enough to be in Israel. Wherever you're planning a vacation, you might want to cancel and you might want to make new plans. Go with an organized group like JNF Go with a travel agent you trust. But God knows the economy needs our help deeply, and everybody loves seeing you, loves that you're there, and feels so supported and as one family. Look at the flag, and underneath, B'yachad Ninatzeach, right? And that's a campaign poster where he's trying to beat out the other candidate. Because there was a mayoral election in Haifa. But together we'll be victorious, but vote for me.
Did you see any of the Arab population in Haifa?
So
when
here's
you
where I
were
saw the
there?
Arab population. Thank you, Bill. I'm just going to keep going with my slideshow to answer your question. Because in Haifa, on the beach, everybody comes. The Arab population, the Jewish population, the Christian population. Haifa is one of these cities where if there's a project underway as to shared society, you see some of the evidence completely. Here is a beautiful quilting project that I wanted to visit, which says in Arabic and in Hebrew and in English, the carpet of good hope. And this was started that everybody saw a Facebook post, and if you got the dimensions, you could create a square that pretty much this was the easiest design, and that's why there's a lot of squares, but people could add their square to this quilt from all the different communities. And it's just a beautiful display of hope amidst the very dark times. And there's a lot of talk about how people are still really working together in Haifa and in other spots around Israel and in the hospitals and in Lod, where it's not, only a few years ago, there's a little bit of rioting in the streets. People are appreciating the kind of shared society, especially in light of the butchery and the horror. That's not us. Some of them went so far as to say, pretty publicly, the Arab communities, that's not us. Here's the Carpet of Good Hope. It was a multi-sector project for the return of the abductees and the memory of the martyrs. And this gentleman over here in the smaller picture, he was the one to really help people put their square in. Now, contrast that to some of the political kind of reality in Jerusalem. There's this one about history in Begin's picture here. 82, Senator Joe Biden threatened to cut off aid to Israel. They were really anticipating this kind of latest round of, well, I shall not send. And you saw a lot of this. Don't threaten us with cutting off your aid. It will not work. I am not a Jew with trembling knees. I am a proud Jew with 3,700 years of civilized history. Nobody came to our aid when we were striving to create our country. We paid for it. We fought for it. We died for it. We will stand by our principles. We will defend them. So you see that this kind of rhetoric about a Begin rhetoric about strong Am Yisrael, despite the rest of the world's call for ceasefire, that like I saw an email from a fellow congregant today. Why haven't we embraced this notion of calling for Hamas's total surrender in face of what's going on? Why is it that from our side it's a ceasefire instead of calling for a surrender and a return of all hostages unconditionally? This Hebrew is a really interesting Hebrew. For anybody who reads the Hebrew, I'll just translate it. Ze lo yamin usmol, ze or v'choshech. It's not a matter anymore of right or left. It's a matter of there is light and there is darkness. And we know what the darkness looks like. And that was on many more places than I expected it. This is all in Nachlaot, right where the Shuk is, the outdoor market, that neighborhood. But some of it's down in the German colony, in the more English-speaking and Anglo communities. So from Israeli Sephardic communities to Israeli Ashkenazi communities, some of this is really the feeling. And for the most part, right now, the latest that I read in Times of Israel, 75% of Israelis really still support moving into Rafah in pointed ways, and that we have to remain strong and ensure that we don't have another of these. Now, I contrast that to pilgrimage sites that I witnessed for some Israelis. This is a beautiful, two beautiful pictures of the doors of a synagogue in Nachlaot neighborhood, where I saw some people praying for their loved ones, the 12 tribes of Israel unified on the left, Eshet Chayil, women who were killed. There were little memorials that I didn't get into the picture for those women. It used to be a pub, this synagogue, but then they changed it because there was not allowed in the neighborhood to have a watering hole. And
Really?
if it's in Nachlaot, and if we ever get a chance to be in Jerusalem together, I'll bring you to where these doors are, and we'll tour the neighborhood. The shuk itself is pretty lively. Jerusalem life is thriving, though some security folks will warn you from walking through the shuk on a Friday because it's busy. They have to do that. The shuk has not lost its luster, its life, its electricity. There are not as many tourists, but there are more Israelis who are coming in to have a beer. And there's a sign in this bar that says, if you want to buy a soldier a beer, pay for an extra one. So, we did that too. L'chaim. If I'm doing Torah on tap in New York and at Craft and Carry, I figure we should, raise a glass with soldiers. The Machne Yehuda is beautiful. We ate at a restaurant that's kept itself going despite the lack of tourism. This is the sign at Azura. It's in the Iraqi shuk, which is the small shuk beside the big shuk. For anybody who, again, wants to tour through Israel with me, I like these little small spaces in Jerusalem that we found, and it's from the international slow food movement. And these are friends whose son was in Gaza without a cell phone to call home, and we came and brought them to lunch and gave them a hug and let them know we were all thinking of them and praying for them. And then guess who's this? Rabbi Wexler sends his greetings, and so too Sophie Danzig, who had dinner with us, and we made a feast there for an Or Zarua connection in the land of Israel. Rabbi Wexler continues to say, come visit me. Come visit me. And if you're going to go, we'll get you in touch. All this, my Facebook feed comes with a suggestion from Danny Epstein. Come visit the fjords of Norway with the Jews, with your Jewish community, with your Jewish family. I'll tell you, I've always wanted to visit the fjords of Norway. It's on my bucket list. But it proves that Facebook, it does listen to you sometimes and gives you, because of the algorithm, but sometimes you just get the strangest things, maybe international travel. My point here is I couldn't think about planning a next trip or vacation without knowing when's the next time I'm going to step in the land of Israel. I hadn't even been there 3 days. And I'm encouraging everyone to think about either going back with me on another of these JNF missions, and we'll make it happen, or a Ramah mission, if that's your gig, because Ramah's going. Sharon Shofsky-Mack and Shira are going in April. So they're out there, these other missions. We should plan. We should know when we're going to Israel, not to Norway. Speaking of the land and protecting it and thinking a little long term, I wrote this in my letter as well. That Friday I sent one. I got the inside scoop from the Society for Protection of Nature in Israel that nature has taken a beating as well. The agricultural terrorism was just rabid. It was burned. They stole tractors. They knew exactly what they were doing, attacking the farms and the fields in addition to people. And what you have to understand about Hamas is that they know exactly what the land looks like, and where they might attack is not just about the people and the Jews they kill, it's the land of Israel they're willing to scorch. This area of land, though, is a lush area. It will be reclaimed as wetlands. Since the end of the 19th century, when we drained it, and that whole story about draining the swamps, while we're in the middle of war, now is the time that town councils and these private kibbutzes like Magan Michael, where this is deciding to say yes to the reclamation of wetlands, and that will bring back natural flora, fauna, natural species. It's on the coast near Magan Michael, just south of Haifa.
Okay.
Here's the experts showing you how many wetlands used to be and how many wetlands we don't have. And these folks are at work every day, and they're part of the effort to continue the great story of Eretz Yisrael while the troops are doing their thing And while everybody's struggling, if you're turned from your home, and while you're living your life as a student or however you're living, just to know that there's long-term thinking, long-term planning. This is really happening. And the Society for Protection of Nature in Israel was just here, right? Jay Shofet spoke at Or Zarua just a couple of weeks ago. We had him for Kiddush in the Round. And here is some of the pictures on the wall at this wonderful birding center that they have in this area. And the birds will only flock more, Israel being the migration center it is. And there is Sigal at what was the Beit HaTfutzot, the Diaspora Museum, which is now called Anu, our people. And Sigal is featured in one of the exhibitions. So we couldn't be with her in person. She's literally there. She was filmed a few years ago, and she comes up as one of the if you will, screens, and exchanges. So we said shalom to Sigal. I wanted to be in Tel Aviv with my children. That's right.
Thank you. Huh?
That's what she's.
These are wonderful portraits of worldwide Jews who have a portion in the great unfolding of the story of the Jewish people around the diaspora and in Israel particularly. And
Beautiful
at the museum, they've already turned the last exhibition halls into memorial of sorts, an exhibition of artists really working through the terror and the horror through the art that they're producing. And you see some of the shots here of the vehicles that were really attacked, the whirlwind at the festival, the music festival, the tornado of torture and terrorism, the angels of death that descended upon folks. And this is a kind of topography of what is going on in someone's head and mind. And it's a map of Israel with a topographical kind of notion of what's inside the minds and hearts of people. It's a really interesting exploration. It's a style that I've seen over the years now in Israeli art. And we could put together a whole show about using topographical maps and the ideas of space, land, shared society, terror, horror, fear, ideas, innovation, all kinds of things that go along with these kinds of images. So really amazing to see already that art is on the wall. The Haifa, my last night in Haifa led me to do a little bit of that pumping the economy for my children. But on the right, when you get to the cash register, what's there? Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael. That's the song we sing every day in our prayers and at the Torah. Was on Mondays and Thursdays only, but we've moved that into every day at Or Zarua of our prayers. It says, our brothers, Kol Beit Yisrael, the whole house of Israel, those that are in Sarah, in Suris, in trouble, and who are besieged, and they're standing there between the sea and between the dry land. May the Holy One have mercy upon them and redeem them from their trouble towards a sense of redemption, and from the fog of terror to the light, from the enslavement to redemption. May it be now speedily. And we all say amen. That's the Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael. And that's right next to the cash register. And so that's what you see. You see that stores, and this happens to be owned by Russian Olim. They're all there. The whole people united. Sunday, I left Haifa and I got to Hostage Square, and that's Linda Avitan, if you remember her. Jeremy and Leora Seltzer, Ronit and Mark. Ronit and Leora's mother, Linda, who lives in Israel, in Ashkelon. Very activist with the Masorti movement, and at the Hostage Square as often as she can be to see this gentleman in the middle, Dani, a father whose son is a hostage. And each of the families at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, this area that's near the government buildings and by the museum, this whole area has become an area where families are in small tents. You see the tents up in the upper left-hand corner of the picture, and this set table, that famous kind of notion of we're waiting for all our loved ones, but the table where hostages who were killed or still, we don't know about really what happened to them. They're there with only pita to eat, one pita a day, and maybe some dirty water. And that's why this is set up this way. And the art at this Hostage Square is powerful. And you see that there's already a sign made, the hostages in missing square, the heart in chains. There's the Tel Aviv buildings kind of behind it in the reflection, just to show you how powerful this is in the middle of the city. Hands coming out of the soil. I'm looking down into a barrel here, and all the pictures of those killed in this barrel, and the heart that says Halev Shalanu Shavui Ba'aza. Our hearts are held captive in Gaza. Machzirim et kulam achshav. Return everyone now. Bring them home in the yellow is seen in lots of places, this kind of stencil cutout poster with setups of what looks like almost like chess pieces, weird chess pieces that some of them look like they are either blindfolded hostages. You see like their hands are tied. So it's kind of like they just are made a game of life with no respect. You are not alone, this kind of thing. So bring them home now. We've heard a lot, and we know the website Bring Them Home, and we've been counting with Bring Them Home because there's a hostage and family forum who has a counter. But you are not alone is another sentiment that's really rising right now. To say you are not alone, we will not forget you. We will not stop mentioning you. We will not stop telling your stories. We will not stop listening to your stories. You are not alone. You are not alone. And that's an important sentiment for a lot of the hostage families. They want their loved ones to know they are not alone, not just that we want to bring them home, that we come to the square and that we see the art, and that, you know, the people who wanted peace, their hands are tied. Literal people who wanted peace, who lived at the border, their hands are tied. They were the ones to bring Gazan children to our hospitals. They were the peace activists. They were there to settle the land, yes, to keep our borders safe, but they were there also to say, we'll be the first ones to be the neighbors. Remember, people who are living down there are realists. They were the ones to say, I'll be the first to have Gazans, Palestinians as my neighbors. The babies in cages. The dancers floating off. And the dancers doing dance at Hostage Square. This is a little surprising to me, to see that there are professional Tel Aviv dancers from Batsheva Dance Company and from the modern dance companies, and they're leading dances and trust exercises because they're putting trust back into society, in a society that's really, really struggling with trust at all. One of the deepest issues that I think we could say that has come is, how can we ever trust again? You know, what do we liken it to? Being in a subway car and trusting everybody there? I mean, these days that's also got its own fraught a little bit. When you drive and you're driving down a road and you're trusting that many people, and you have to trust other drivers that they're going to stay in their lane, that they're not whacked out on something. The trust factor. And so the dancers have taken front row to doing some of the healing work with groups from high schools that are coming from the South and groups coming from the North and people in general coming from around the world. And by the way, non-Jews from Spain, Peru, China, who are all coming to say, we're with you. You're not alone. I met more international people on Hostage Square than I imagined I would. Just like I didn't imagine I was going to actually experience, not just, you could call them tourists, they're there on a tourist visa, but visitors, like there to show their solidarity and to really be with these hostage families. The dog tags that we're wearing that say our hearts are held captive in Gaza and we're counting the days. That's a big artistic theme. You see this one here? This is a oversized dog tag between the two Israeli flags. And this, again, are pieces of pita to say for every one of the hostages, there was a pita on this three-dimensional installation to say that's all they're eating daily. We know from reports of the hostages that they're given a pita and some water. The Masorti movement, the egalitarian Jewish sister to what you would call conservative, what you might call traditional egalitarian, they are doing a 5 o'clock or 5:30 shirah, singing and praying at the hostage square every day. So we're doing our part by way of an egalitarian community, a Jewish community, and it was really powerful. Here's the Masorti movement and their songbook, and they say it's a time to cry, and there's a time to hug and a time to love and a time to build, and they have shirts, and that also became like a theme I saw on several pieces of graffiti around Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. The Hostages Family Forum is in kibbutz headquarters, because where from are the hostages? Those kibbutzim down south near the Gaza border. The day after, families created this forum in order to tell the stories of the human beings, in order to do the diplomacy around the globe, in order to figure out who the speakers would be, to go tell the stories of individuals, their lives, the who they are, the how we desire every minute for them to be in our hearts and to return them now, bring them home now. This man, Donnie, again, he's the same guy who we saw on Hostage Square there with me and Linda. This is a brother of this young man is the brother of one of the hostages. It's kind of on the wall behind him, this picture where my arrow is. And he's telling the story of his brother and how he just had a great love for life and a great love for the festival and all the folks who were there dancing. And there was this whole group in the room who I couldn't photograph. And this guy sitting here is one of the directors of the Family Forum. There's a whole group of journalists and civic leaders from Montreal who were listening to a French translation of everything being said so they could go back to Canada and help bring back the story at a time that's very fraught with the Canadian government, if you've read the latest news. Get them out of hell. This notion of just putting it straightforwardly, and their diplomatia, it says diplomacy. Well, sometimes you have to be a little bit more straightforward, say some of the leaders of a hostage forum. Just get them out of hell. My mission the next day was, and here's my friend David, with whom we kind of took this on together on behalf of Or Zarua. We then went to the fields in Nachala. Nachala is down south, and if you were interested, it's near the House of Smoked Meats, Levy's Barbecue. They obviously knew that that was of interest for another time when I should come back. You see here on the map. We had people of all ages on the trip. You see people just putting on gloves and getting themselves into the fields here. And these guys are from Hashomer HaChadash, one of the groups that JNF, I'm now in the JNF mission. And this is one of the groups that JNF has a relationship with. They are about patrolling areas up in the north in the Galil with horseback patrols so that no one's stealing or encroaching on each other's lands, and they're trying to keep peace among Arab and Israeli villagers and farmers. And down south now, they're bringing people to the fields, and they're doing all the work that's necessary. 265,000 volunteers have gone to harvest in the state of Israel just now, because we've lost half of the professional harvesting crews from Thailand and from other nations in the Far East. And their own young men from all these kinds of facilities are out now in army service. 10% have been American or from foreign places. About 8% probably American and 2% not. And so that leaves Israelis. And then 30 to 35% of all those, according to Hashomer HaChadash statistics, who's really running this whole kind of volunteer campaign for the harvests that need to happen, are Haredim, are ultra-Orthodox Jews, who have decided to do some of their part by volunteering in the fields, and have done so explicitly in order to really say we're participating in a way right now in this war effort. And I received a whole group of pictures, just I couldn't slip it into the presentation, of how they are having mifkashim. They're called mifkashim. It's a technical term educationally in Israel, where they bring ultra-Orthodox and secular youth and adults together in order to really do a project together and meet some for the first time, meeting someone from the other walks of life in Israel. And they're doing it in the fields, volunteering. That got us closer to the south that day, and we were on to the music festival site, only kilometers away from the Gaza Strip. There are some of the names of the kibbutzim and settlements that, when we say settlement, it doesn't mean settlement like we use in the other areas of Israel. I mean, the towns that were built in the south way back when. But the music festival site was our destination. And so the Nova Music Festival site was a pilgrimage of sorts. That was where these young, beautiful, dancing, international, Jewish, Israeli, all walks coming together in the name of hopes, of futures that were bright, and sharing of music. And they wanted to only open the fences to Palestinians at all these different festivals and figure out how culturally they make bridges so that they could show the world. And some of the organizers have manifestos of that sort. They were ready, again, to be the neighbors, to dance together. And this was the site of the massacre. This was the killing field. And all the little flags and all the little signs here are where people were brutally murdered. And there are all their faces. And we were getting prepared for a memorial service. And I was invited at that point to come and speak before the Kaddish and offer some liturgy of sorts and make a memorial prayer as well. And so that got me really in finishing writing a poem that I had started here, actually, before a Kaddish that I thought was coming up for what I thought might be a unique Yizkor. There was a lot of talk among the rabbinate about when we'd have the first memorial around the Jewish world, and whether or not we'd be waiting till Pesach or it would be beforehand to see if we could have that and then move into Purim. Well, this for me was the memorial I needed to move me into my Purim spirit right now, because I don't think I'd be there if it were not for doing this memorial at Nova. And there's already stars and candles and posters of all these beautiful young people. Thank God I came back to the Heschel Harmonizers here on Shabbat and the high schoolers who sang, because they're somehow really came in place of some of the souls. They were singing for the souls we lost in Nova. And they're so beautiful. And there's this whole scene is full of people from all different walks from Israeli life, from ultra-religious to nationalist religious to secular to funky to, what we might call just the high school crowd coming on a bus because their teachers knew that they had to come at some point to really steer into that and help deal with the trauma. And I found the liturgy on the far left is the liturgy that the chief rabbinate created with a new El Malay that I'm sure will become part of every Yizkor from here on. And when we make this El Malay, just like we stand up for the victims of the Holocaust and just like we have for the collective who we remember at our Yizkors, I'm positive that this will appear in Sidurim from this October 7th on, or from this whatever day this was penned. It's an El Malay Rachamim that says we want eternal comfort under the wings of the Shekhinah for the pure and the heroes whose lives were taken, the citizens of Israel, the men, the women, the children that were murdered and killed and burned and terrorized at the hands of Hamas butchers, and gave their souls for the sake of our nation, our people. This was some Torah that I was reading at the time, that oh Lord, to you I cry, Elecha Adonai Ekra, Ki Esh Ochla Neot Midbar, because the fire has devoured the pastures. You know, finding the words within the tradition really helped me focus on what I wanted to say. After chanting the El Maleh, I got to introduce the Kaddish, and here's the poem that I wrote for the occasion, that the Nova organizers, the site organizers, asked me if they could keep for the liturgical record. And I feel very honored about that. And I registered it as Rabbi Bolton with our congregation, or Zarua from New York. And here's the poem. Ahovim elenu hem shenergu benova, במלחמה בהמשך הסיוט, נעלמו כציפורים שרקדו ועפו, כבר לא נראו, אבל קשורים אנו לנשמתם לנצח. בגשר הקדיש נלך להגיע אל אורם הזוהר, להחזירו לעולם, קדושים יהיו. They are our beloved, those murdered at the Nova Music Festival, warring, fighting for their lives as the nightmare continued, like dancing songbirds soaring away, no longer in sight. To whose soul there is an eternal connection, we shall walk over the bridge of the Kaddish, to arrive where their light still shines, to proclaim they did not die in vain, but as martyrs of their people, they are and always will be. We said a Kaddish. The mission, the Israelis who heard a memorial service happening, that JNF helped orchestrate, that other rabbis with their groups who were there, and others of high schools and religious communities and secular and from Tel Aviv and from Jerusalem, and we all gathered and we said a Kaddish. It was so powerful at Nova. It really was. Those young, bright stars. And then JNF arranged for a sofer to be on site, and anyone who wanted could contribute to tzedakah and put a letter in a Sefer Torah in memory of all those who were slaughtered from Nova festivals from all over Israel. And so there, our group, each person came and was participating, and everybody got a letter. And here's the words in the Joseph story. My letter was hey, hashva l'tova. It was going to be that God would think of doing this on behalf of Am Yisrael. Joseph says to his brother, for the good, for all of us. And please God, it should only be that we see some goodness come out. Speaking of goodness, we continued in the south, right near the Gaza border, kilometers away. Here's the Gaza border, the dotted line. You see, here's Rafah, and here's Khan Yunis, right? Following. And here is Pri Gan, a community, and here is Shlomit. So this is an area where they have several small communities that have kind of like little towns. There's 80 families in Shlomit. They're relatively new. Pri Gan has been there since Hakamat HaMedina, since the state was created. Actually, they were there in 48. They were chased away. Then they came back in 51. And they were one of these communities that was always there. And they're very secular. Shlomit, on the other hand, 80 families, very religious. And they have young men in the community, and they have an organized watch. And they get a call on Simchat Torah morning. One of those calls that you can't ignore, even though you're religious and you don't use your phones. There are ways to get to each other. And they hear that terrorists are on the route to Pre-Gan and they're going to slaughter everybody. So they all look at each other and they say, nobody seems to be at our doorstep. Should we send 4 of our best? Collectively with 15 children between them. And they decide, yes, they're running with their weapons to Pre-Gan. And they get a lay of the land, and Pre-Gan has this little kind of higher ground, and the terrorists are coming up, and they create a little bit of a half moon banana kind of formation, and they fight back all the terrorists, and they save every one of those Pre-Gan residents, not an injury and not a single person dead in the community. They save everyone, and then a motorcycle comes busting through because they use those motorcycles with terrorists riding on the back with machine guns, and 4 of them from Shlomit are killed, leaving 4 widows, 1 pregnant, 15 children. And at Shlomit, we went to help them rebuild. 40 families came back. They're the first community to come back kilometers from the border. Half of the families are coming back. And there we are building, and well, there I am giving ruach, support for these women who are amazing builders, and the crews who were doing picnic tables so we could set it up for kids with a little bit more of a feeling of home. And the artist from JNF who they hire, that for $10,000 you can have a bomb shelter painted so that it doesn't look like it's just plain concrete. For $50,000 you can put another bomb shelter into these communities. You know, they have their tzedakah and their plans, but this artist really makes and brings to life like the beauty on the sides of these walls. So when kids literally get off the bus from school, they're not looking at, you know, bomb shelter painted across it. They're looking at beautiful art that this guy does around the country in lots of different places, and especially now in bomb shelters through JNF to really beautify things. And Philly did that one, by the way. So the group from Philly decided what was going to be on it. You know, they have their own sports groups and the mascots. And so there's some, you know, JNF connection in Philadelphia. And this is the widow right here of one of those 4 who gave his life. And a deeper emunah, deeper faith I have never heard in my life. Never in my life. He is close to Hashem right now. He signed up for this. He made me laugh. I'm grateful for the matana, the gift I had of my marriage with him, for my 4 children, my 6 children. 2 are old enough to, are they children? For the beautiful life we built, for the land we love, for the protection we afforded our neighbors. He died in shlichut as an agent of God here down on earth. She moved right back to the community with her kids. And she says, and this is Parshat Vayikra this week. This is the Vayikra, the Leviticus. And so this is weighing so deep. Like, he was a true korban. She thinks of that as a profoundly comforting idea, that he was a sacrifice for our people, our land, their family. And she blessed all of us that we should feel that kind of connectivity to being part of Am Yisrael and what kind of responsibility we want to take for our family. I have not heard as deep a profession of faith in my life. But faith comes in all kinds of ways. And one of the amazing kind of responses we made as well was with the team that is mixed between Jews and Arabs and Druze and Christians and all kinds of people working together in Beersheba, Soroka Medical Center, where a department is named in our own Dr. Larry Norton's name, an entire division for cancer treatment. Shkoyach Larry. Here we have Soroka Medical Center, and we got a full presentation with very deeply unbelievable images of what kind of trauma they had to deal with that day of October 7th. And the kind of resilience
Where is it?
at Soroka Medical Center is in Beersheba. And where they had faced only in their worst medical nightmares, the kinds of injuries and the kinds of situations. And, Barry, you could do much more justice to this talk than I'm going to do for this segment, but I'll show you a few things. They were talking about 671 casualties in the first 24 hours. Nobody's prepared for that. Nobody in the world. And 42 were children, 135 seriously wounded, 65 plus 44, all kinds of immediate responses, new surgical wards. And by the way, the top 3 trauma surgeons at the time were out of the country and not there. And residents and medical students took up posts and learned on the job. And they were humble enough to say there were things we could have done differently. To this group of the JNF mission, who had the inside scoop because of the relationship with the Jewish National Fund. And he's sharing about how, there's this kind of notion here of lack of formal diagnosis shall not and will not prevent treatment. Well, they had to do with that much trauma. And so they treated and they let things happen in that hospital that maybe they would have never let happen any other day in that hospital, including the residents who didn't have any of this experience, who scrubbed right in and were part of this team, and they gave them enough of the basics over time, and they relied on some of the kind of sismot they have, like the kind of basic principles that they've taught in the past. And they even look at what's happening here. They even let the dog, because one of the officers, he was in charge of this pup as the canine unit goes. And all he could think about was, where's my dog? Is my dog all right? Because that's what he's trained for. And so they let the dog into the operating room. Now, again, 671, how you deal with trauma. And maybe it was only the post-care room and not the operating room, but you wouldn't have let a dog in to any of the rooms, is his point. They lost people there. And there are Yizkor pictures around Israel. There are Yizkor pictures on houses. There are Yizkor pictures on walls of apartments where soldiers who gave their lives over the last months have died. Everywhere you go, you see Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory be a blessing, may her memory be a blessing. And they're willing to put those faces out and share, because the community strengthens each other. Our people strengthen each other when we share our losses and we hear from others. Hamakom Yunachem, may the Holy One comfort you. Tell me about him. I met a family member of one of the people on the easels at Soroka, because people are like that. They're mitchaber. We were there to be together. Tell me about him, I said. They held up the bus. We drove from there, from Beersheba, to a barbecue for all the troops we could possibly invite that night, to one of the big 5 tents where the A-team, you see this sign? That's this major volunteer organization who's come together to create 5 tent sites like this, where people can volunteer to, by the way, have their kitchens koshered if they weren't before, and come to the spot of these tents and cook and cook and cook. And anybody who wants a hot meal instead of rations, any soldier who can get there for any meal during the day can come. There's a shower, there's a little library, there's a little private spot that's with a comfortable seat, because you don't really get so much of that when you're in active duty. And they had a concert there. JNF brought in the Special in Uniform Band. And if you remember, some of you might have been there. We had a meeting at Ken Sytak's house about Special in Uniform. The JNF supports this incredible regiment Israel is the only army in the entire world that has a division for developmentally disabled adults. They use people with special needs and special abilities to really watch the radar in a deeper way than we could possibly, given their. But there are some singers, there are some performers among this crowd, and they have a band that sings their hearts out and got this whole tent rocking for the night. It was beautiful. And then people ate dinner, and I spent some time davening and learning in the Beit Midrash, in the little tent Beit Midrash that they set up on the site. And I met some really wonderful people and a guy from Jerusalem who's working on expanding egalitarian Judaism for Israeli religious folks who would have their Yahadut in a little bit of a different flavor. And so there we were in the middle of the war near the Gaza border. And he's asking me, so how do you guys do it at Or Zarua? And, are they, because some people just don't know, is everybody equal all the time, or is it only some of the time? He's asking me detailed questions. The following day, speaking of everyone, this woman here, Basma, she is the first Druze restaurant owner to make her restaurant kosher, so she can cook thousands of meals a day or thousands of meals a week for soldiers in the north. Her restaurant's called Nor. You see it there? And JNF has helped her really through supporting a small business network in the north, like a chamber of commerce, supported her in koshering her restaurant, getting the ingredients she needs, bringing groups in to cook with her every day, to chop, to mince, to slice, to dice. And we were all involved in creating this beautiful meal. We ate some of it because that was our lunch stop, but we sent fresh salad and schnitzel. I never cut cabbage so thin in my life. Because, if you get the cabbage that's too thick, that's the first thing you're going to complain about in your lunch. So I took my responsibility really seriously. But the Golani Brigade, those up north, they basically sent a video of thanks. They don't want their pictures circulated for security purposes. But the Golani Brigade, 450 soldiers ate, instead of a can of tuna, literally their rations for lunch, they ate schnitzel and cabbage and olives, fresh olives, and hummus with a little za'atar. It was just a beautiful preparation, and a rice dish that's uniquely Druze. And she's now offering the rest of her Druze community inroads to make a connection with the army. Her husband served in the Israeli army back years ago, got injured in combat. And because she felt so loyal to his brigade, she called when the war broke out and she said, I want to cook for everybody. I have a little restaurant. And the army said, okay, but is it kosher? She said, I'll make it kosher. And she said, so how many? 45, 50? Because that's who usually goes away for Miluim. And they said, no, your husband's company today, not 45, 450. She said, no problem. And she said, throughout the week, I'll make sure to do 1,000 plus. That's the kind of dedication right now that the Druze community is showing. That day, we got on the bus. I opened the paper, and I have to tell you, I was a little disturbed to read that senators were urging Biden to hold military aid when we were really doing things in a very, very kind of precise way. And we heard from these soldiers how precise the battle plans are. And also looking out the window of the bus just at that moment, take a look at this billboard. What is unique about that billboard in the land of Israel that you will find in no other country in the Middle East? There are two women who are Arab with no head covering right in the middle of a junction on the highway, out there saying, life is to pursue. Free life, all it means, democratic Israel in all its promise. What could it be if only we would have neighbors who agree to live near each other? May it be. Ken Yehi Ratzon. One day. But the kind of democracy that we're really trying to hold up has no tolerance at all for terrorism and for people who would come tunnel into children's rooms and take hostages and slaughter innocents. And we've been saying what day it is. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum has a counter. You can tap into that online. This was today's 165 days, 10 hours. The pictures and the stories of each of the hostages, they're online. And they don't want to be alone. Activists are trying very hard to keep their images front and center in all of Israeli society. This is a group of people who really feel like they want to keep the hostages front and center. There's a debate. Many people have said to us over the course of the mission, do we win the war or do we bring the hostages home? And they said, there's no debate. Both are essential. But they say like this, the Hostages Forum, this is the line they've obviously given to everybody. What's more urgent? Because you don't know how many minutes someone who's held captive really has. So the more urgent for us is hostages and bring them home. And that's what the Hostages Forum is saying. And these are putting them on milk containers, just like you said. It's like we have kidnapped kids on the milk containers. They're putting the stickers on. Hatufa means held hostage. We've been saying our prayer for the release of the hostages each day at Minyan in the morning, each Shabbat. So we'll continue to say that. This is just the text of it. And there's this new campaign, in addition to Bring Them Home Now, to really raise our voice for the women who were raped and tortured. And this was all over Tel Aviv as well in a new kind of art campaign, which is really, really pretty incredible. UN Women, your silence
In English?
is unjustified. UN justified. Yeah, and they're doing it in English to use this UN as United Nations, you have been silent about violence against women. On my last day of the mission, past these posters, I took Menucha's card out of my pocket to remember her as well, the 76-year-old woman. And I was on my way to the IsraAid office. I kind of took a detour from the mission for a moment because a friend of mine introduced me to IsraAid. And I met Yotam Palitzer, who is an incredible CEO of an organization that is now a $30 million a year budget. You might have recognized the yellow vest, like when the dogs go to Turkey in the earthquake, or the Haiti portable hospital gets set up in Haiti, or they're there for the tsunami recovery around the world, and they're exporting Israeli ingenuity and disaster recovery. IsraAid has this now emergency Israel turn. They're pivoting to do inside Israel work that really responds to the disasters that we're facing and bring the wisdom that they have from the rest of the world in their experience into Israel and be on the front line of thinking about the day after. And that is, they're working with the government through Ron Dermer's office to help coordinate and make manifest all of the humanitarian, what you call them humanitarian, but all of the civil society efforts that will be needed in order to reclaim life as normal, both in Israel, in the north and the south, and in Gaza. And they're trying to harness world organizations, army veterans who do this when governments leave places and veterans come and swoop in and they teach people how to rebuild and how to build schools and how to put new roads down and how to really create infrastructure of civil society again. So Yotam is involved with that. And I needed to see him. I met him in New York. He said, come to the office in Tel Aviv. Let's just touch base. And he's going to have a parlor meeting, and we're going to invite people from Or Zarua to be at a parlor meeting with IsraAid to hear about this notion that the next phase for Am Yisrael is to take the lead into really being the builder and to bring our wisdom to bear as to how to create this potential of shared society through the infrastructure that we know we need and that has to be created now, that we're really ripping apart the tunnels that are full of terror and the society as it stands. We'll do that only with partners. We'll do that only with worldwide investment. We'll do that only with the support of new partners in the Middle East, maybe with whom we're going to sign agreements. It's all part of the strategic plan that I hear unfolding, being, kind of set onto the table. And a little bit into politics. They're really trying to coordinate all of the shelters for housing evacuees and training local mental health specialists and emergency specific psychosocial support, and then bringing Israel's most vulnerable communities into delivering protective spaces to different villages that are down there. So shared society works in Israel. And then that ultimately leads to the coordination with other humanitarian activities in the shared space of the entire Middle East. Now, I mentioned this before, but today's news, March 20th, despite war, Israel ranks 5th in World Happiness Report. Can you believe it? Because people sense in each other the kind of strength that's necessary to get through even the darkest of times, the nightmares of a time that we're having. And it's an annual report of countries 143. More Israelis wanted to know about how anti-Semitism in America is impacting us than who let me ask them questions about what was going on with their families and the war. Just today, we have new reportage from a professor. But I just put up the slide because you can follow a lot in the Times of Israel. Top 7, 8, 9, 10 stories will be all about what's going on in Israel and Gaza. And the next one, English language press, about anti-Semitism in the United States. The sun was setting on my mission and my trip. This is Tel Aviv, just looking out from my balcony. That was more a dorm than a luxury hotel. It reminded me of my life in New York, this image, because of this beautiful painting that I saw at the Met months ago with Amy. This port shot. This is Andre Derain. Yeah. And this beautiful shot, just kind of, I remembered it when I saw the ships. Yeah. And I thought of life back in New York and coming back here after this incredible mission with JNF, thinking that we have to double down on our commitments to making sure our hearts and souls and our spirits are really still there, with that. Not only are we going to think about when we could get back there together to put our hands and hearts to work, but that they should know they're never alone. And we could do that from the sense of the spiritual work we do, if not the tzedakah work that we're going to continue. And we started strong. We have to continue to be strong when it comes to this connection. JNF really helped me. Dina Schiff, who led the mission in a certain sense, all of the staff really did amazing. And all the guides were really wonderful. And all the individuals who I mentioned, plus, were really inspiring. Dina is the chief of staff of JNF and really led the mission with some deep kavanah to connect Americans and American Zionists. The cool thing was they were from Cincinnati and Minnesota, Austin and Montana, California and New York City, Florida and Wyoming. I mean, there were people there who were Zionist, who thought of Zion as being the next great, at least, if not center, space of the unfolding of the story of the Jewish people, that we can never lose hope, that we'll just be the true light to the world that we're meant to be. And that we are right now so responsible to be part of building and rebuilding everything that's there. And I found that flying El Al gets you, amazingly connected right when you take off. They had a better 2023 than anybody ever imagined. Who knew the war would lead so many soldiers to fly back home and take up their posts? Who knew missions would keep going? Who knew that we would be planning trips already, who knows when, months away, a couple of weeks away. And there it is, the small land God promised our ancestors that we are required to share with the people who live there. Because the alternative, and thinking of people as others who just we can displace or, God forbid, kill, which some sentiments have been voiced. And we will say that those are radical and have no place in the Jewish people's heart. We know that a new day has to dawn. And we know that a new chapter has to be written after this nightmare. And October 7th will go down as the day post-Holocaust that changes the way that we have to move this story forward. And it will be shared, as this picture always connoted or denoted, with the Golden Dome and the kind of way we've been, with a very generous heart, willing constantly to live as neighbors, if not in true peace. We continue to keep the bracha at the end of the Amidah, that shalom should reign, sim shalom ba'olam. We demand it. We also know that Yerushalayim, even though I pictured it, this Yerushalayim is the Yerushalayim of the earth, of the down here kind of reality on the ground. The Gemara in Tani says that there is a sacred city in the midst, and God says, I will not enter the city. Lo avo be'ir. And so the verse is puzzling, because it's a sacred city in your midst. Why won't God come in? If it's sacred, God should come. Rabbi Yochanan said the verse should be understood as follows. The Holy One, blessed be God, said, I shall not enter Jerusalem above until I enter Jerusalem below. The Gemara asks, and is there such a place as Jerusalem above? The Gemara answers, yes, it's written, Jerusalem built up, a city unified together. Godliness we've yet to fully discover. Divine reality as we can imagine it. And we I believe, are always on the forefront of imagining a divine reality where all people share a sentiment that life is precious. Children are the greatest to invest in. The idea of shared space despite anyone's background or creed. We have this divine vision, even as a strong family, with our own culture, our own commitments. And we see that that's not happening. We see plainly that that's not happening since October 7th. And we know that we have to commit those to the family right now to rebuild our land and our family first, so that we can get to a place where we take the lead in bringing about the greater visions of what the prophets say, that we are the light to nations, and that there is a connection between the dream of Jerusalem and the reality of Jerusalem down below. That's what I believe the Gemara is always reminding us of, being that it was a Wednesday night. I had to get a little Talmud into the picture. This, I hope, gave you a real sense of what it meant to be in Israel and with our people, and your shaliach there, your agent on the ground, in that sense that I took on. And I hope that we can do that for each other as people come and go. And like I said, if this leads us to think about when we get there next, please God, it should be together. I'm definitely open to that conversation. I hope we'll have it soon. Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you.
So I'll take a few comments and questions if people would like, and I'm going to unpin myself so that, how do I do that? Remove spotlight so I can see everybody. Yeah, Aaron.
Very quickly, Rabbi, because others will want to speak as well, but I want to say that extraordinary is not a strong enough word to describe the poetry, the visual poetry, the tom of the level of understanding that you've brought to us. And it makes me sadder, because I think back to 24 years ago when I met with Elon Pincus and Ido Aharoni. Elon was the country general at the time, with a handful of PR professionals to try to get them to understand how they could communicate better. And we still have that terrible situation where there seems to be this attitude, we don't have to worry about helping people understand what the reality is. If they don't understand it, it's their problem. Because you've now created, you've shared photos and information and understanding that the world should know about. And frankly, that even what's going on with the war, I'm sure that there are visuals and evidence of the criminals in Gaza who are hiding among the population, and no one sees that. No one sees that what's going on in the tunnels because the Israeli government wants to keep the public relations component secret because they're afraid.
We're doing our part by being here and being in solidarity. And so let's take a moment and say we're doing this mitzvah of Ahavat Yisrael together, of that kind of the learning we need to really lift up the truth, and
And
hopefully that will make some difference.
Yes, and you should feel honored to share this with the world.
Just cause. Children at a minimum, but more than that.
For sure, for sure. This was recorded, and I'm going to make sure it was, it's gonna be circulated so that people can listen in. I'm actually going to stop the recording now, though, and then we'll still stay on. But I just wanted to start processing so that I don't lose the whole recording.